Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of the Forever Forward sort of podcast. Now, this one is very different. As you can see, I have Justin with me. He says that I'm co-hosting this pilot series, but really, I'm just gonna be what should I say, an observer in most of the episodes. Listen to the amazing stuff that we're going to discuss. We'll dive into what the pilot series is going to be all about in a moment. But Justin, great to be hanging out with you once again. It's always cool to hang out with you.
Great, thank you too.
Perfect. So, Justin, we've been talking about, and I think your name has become an acronym with smart buildings. I mean, at least that's the way I look at it in my dictionary. Smart buildings equal to Justin, and Justin is equal to smart buildings. I think the world of the audience, largely in across LinkedIn, and everyone who's been working in smart buildings, knows that you're quite passionate about finding what's smarter, right? So firstly, would love to know, maybe tell about yourself to the listeners, the very few who probably don't know you yet, and the why of us doing this pilot sort of episode series around what's smarter and everything that we've discussed from retrofits to smart buildings and everything. Yeah, but why don't you give a debrief to the listeners? Yeah.
Yeah, so look, the short version is I'm an erstwhile academic, okay, an author, and my academic background is human-centered design. So I haven't, and I ended up in smart buildings by happy accident, and I now wonder whether it's just smart buildings, that I am focused on, perhaps maybe where smart buildings and, for want of a better term, smarter offices or workplace meet.
Hmm.
And I suppose, taking that kind of human centered design or design thinking kind of approach,
Hmm.
it ended up becoming very aware to, being very obvious to me that what I was looking at was an ecosystem. And therefore,
Hmm.
what I've really been doing, and I call it market engagement, but really it's just a form of stakeholder engagement where I go to the market and I speak to the different stakeholder groups to try and get a sense of what their perspectives is. And I think I may have mentioned it
Hmm.
when we caught up last time that, I often use this parable of the six blind people and the elephant to talk about this space, because it's like everyone sort of looks at the smart building space and broader area of where it meets from their own perspective, and therefore that often kind of more holistic view gets lost in there, and there's
Hmm. Hmm.
a sort of lack of common understanding. So what I try and do is really sort of do some sense making around this space by speaking to the different people in different areas, look at it as a phenomena, see what the patterns are, and particularly because I've worked in other domains as a consultant, is bring some thinking from other spaces and try and bring
Into this.
into this, and particularly from sustainability. I mean, why I kind of focused on this space rather than just having a sort of fleeting, moment of inquiry based on some consultancy, was because I've worked in other areas where it's
Hmm.
very hard not to see the word sustainability being anything more than greenwashing. Whereas at least
Hmm.
I think in this space there is some tangible difference that people can be making. Not just
Hmm.
to buildings and how they might be more of energy efficient, but like, better ways of how we work together, collaborate together.
Yeah.
There is some tangible impact that one can see, and that, I think, we've laughed about it before, but every vendor slides deck, either on slide 1 or slide 2, has a statistic which says around 40% of all emissions come from the built
Buildings. Built
environment.
environment.
If there was going to be a space where I could focus on and make some kind of difference, perhaps
Impact.
that's
Yeah.
one where it's a very obvious reason. So kind of leading on to, and it's you who was the catalyst for this pilot series, and it has kind of gone back and forth and evolved a bit. And I guess when we caught up earlier this year, I was becoming a bit overwhelmed by all the predictions that I was seeing in my LinkedIn feed for 2024.
How many? How many have you seen yet? 2024 predictions for 2024?
Connect 1,000 plus people or something. So there, I think it's not a technical term, but there was a shitload. And all and sundry, and in every single industry. Okay, and
Justin, I'm sorry. Let me text my content team. They were about to take out our predictions. Just kidding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, people are quite welcome to do them, but I think the problem is, how do you cut through when everyone's doing them? It's like starts to become noise. And I thought, well, maybe perhaps there might be a better way of doing this, which is like, can we get some consensus about what people see is on the horizon? Because that's what crystal ball gazing is about, what's coming down the line. And the other is that's probably linked to what are the key challenges or the key themes to the industry. And so rather than, and I think it was Dale Carnegie who once said, in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is you're far better asking someone their opinion than telling them your own. So I thought, like, just ask people what they think. And then, if you start sorting the different themes that they come up with, maybe there's some consensus and some things will stand out more than others. And if you ask enough people, then, hopefully we'll see, even more consensus. So that was the basic thing. I'm running a round table to accompany this pilot podcast series, and that's much more about the people who are at the kind of sharp end of smart enablement. So the MSIs, the MEPs, the design consultants, the platform vendors like yourselves. But I thought to give some balance to that, we might get some different stakeholders in this series. So it's not quite in a nutshell. I'm sorry but that's kind of.
I mean, I think the clearer it is, the better it is. So all helpful.
So, I mean, and to try and sort of give people an idea of what this series might be about, I was going to try and put you on the spot a bit and sort of reverse roles so that I end up asking you some questions.
Look, I told you you're just giving me the fake position of being the co-host. You're going to be the host. So
well,
yeah,
I was hoping you might be able to help me sense check some of what because I think it was Matthew Marsden in his piece for Smart Buildings mag who says that does the industry have an honesty problem? Now I'm not saying people we're going to speak to might be dishonest, but it's like there is some overclaiming going on. So, and is there a way that we can resolve some of those types of issues? But but to start, I'm going to just ask you 3 simple questions, which is kind of what you asked me, but slightly twisted, which is, who are you? What do you do? And why does that matter to whom?
Wow. I think who I am, hey folks, this is Umesh. I run a company called Zempler, which is basically a software that empowers operations and maintenance teams to move to a data-led sort of a regime, and deliver some of the gains that probably Justin just mentioned around sustainability, cost saving, so on and so forth. I guess the last part of the question is a good one. I think apologies. I should have framed it in that way, is because it's just sounds so powerful. I think I've been Justin. I don't have I've not had a glamorous career like yours, right? I mean, I've been a very average person, right from academics till date. But I think I've believed as an individual over work in progress being over perfection. But I guess the point I'm trying to come to is that everything I've been able to do as an individual and what we've been able to do as a team in Zempla has been because there have been tools available. You could go up to internet, look at what's happening, try to build a business and stuff like that. So what we are doing is saying that while all of this conversation is happening around smart building, smart this, smart intelligent this, we are forgetting about millions of tradesmen and technicians who work across the built environment. And if you can help a fraction of them, not everyone. I mean, as a community, we might just be able to do a great job. But as far as as an individual or as a company is concerned, we're working day in and out to just make sure that for some of those people, we can help them see the better light, help them transition to the ultimate data first environment that is an eventual reality, but do that in a manner which gives them great growth opportunities, right? So I mean that's our connect to the built environment. That's our connect to the smart building landscape, as you would say. Beneficiaries of our software happens to be facilities management companies, the ones who actually run facilities, the background work of it, hard services and engineering. But what gives deep pleasure and satisfaction and the ability to go back and have a peaceful sleep is the fact that we try to make a difference in the lives of the people who actually do the hard work day in and day out. So that's probably my response to what we do and why it matters for whom. Not sure how I did a great job as you did, but probably tried my best.
I mean, I think it's very interesting. I mean, last year I ran a round table or facilitated one with developer owner operators, and it's very
Mm,
sort of candid conversation. I mean, particularly about how much technology spectacularly fails, and there seem to be sort of two key reasons for that. One is like over specification, like
right,
too much, not enough of it's needed, therefore it doesn't get utilized properly. The other
right,
thing was the skills gap is like who, there's very often little thought about who is actually going to be operating that and what that
true
might
that.
require in hires and things. So I think that's really interesting. Well, look,
Mm,
part of what I'm trying to do here is, as I said before, is give people a flavor of how this might be a conversation rather than just a
correct,
question and answer things. But
right.
we were talking about how we might do this. I kind of sort of badgered you to give me four themes that you think that you might like to speak about. So I'm going to go very to the end of one of them and then ask you to kind of unpack it backwards, because
Okay.
you talked about what was it about something and clarity, I seem to remember.
Sanity and clarity
Clarity,
is what.
yeah. And I was thinking, wow, if we could sum up every discussion point that neatly, that would be fantastic. But like with sanity and clarity, can you take me back to what was a catalyst for that kind of thought, and what is it that you're really trying to talk
Mm,
about
I think the background, Justin, was that I think even when we've been talking about this podcast for a long time, right? We've been going all over the places as individuals as well as to what it means, the relapse of what it could be, and I think what I've been observing with my limited experience was that when people were prior to 2024, or let's say most part of 2023 and before that, is people were not very clear on what they wanted as outcomes of smart buildings, right? Why did they want their buildings to be smart? What was the end objective? That was not very clear. Often that was never the starting point of the conversation. And I guess that's always, as per first principles, that should be the starting point of the conversation, whether you want your building, your workplace, or whatever it is to be smart, and how is what do you want to achieve, what do you want to achieve, and outcomes for whom, in that sense. And I guess what I wanted to say is for me, 2024, the number one theme that's going to emerge, a trend that's going to emerge, is sanity and clarity. And I say this because, which means to demystify, that a lot of leaders in the built environment are actually going to be very clear on the outcomes they are wanting, which means that whatever pathway they take to move towards their end objective via the smarts is not going to be over engineered. It's going to be very specific to start with, and focus around certain outcomes that they really want to make it happen. I guess And the reason why I say this, there's a very interesting exercise I was doing for my own self over the last month or so, reaching out to a lot of leaders, especially from the FM world, a few from the end asset owner perspective, and trying to understand what, according to them, is going to be the key priorities for 2024. And the amount of clarity I had from all of them across the length and breadth was very good, which said that fair enough. Now I think probably as a community, we are reaching to a point where we'll be sane and clear in our conversations whenever we talk about smart buildings and everything related to it. That's where I think this background of sanity and clarity really comes in, Justin.
So I'm going to sort of bring one of the points forward, because you talked also about net zero and particularly
Mm.
on retrofitting, and what you're saying part, and maybe you can tell me I'm wrong, but it sounded like part of what you touched upon there is connected to that, because people aren't going to over specify, because the way that you might roll out retrofit is very different from what you might do on a new build, and therefore it might be more incremental. But so is that part of why you see the sanity and clarity emerging?
Well, absolutely. I think I wouldn't say that people did not know, but they even knew the way you build smarts in a greenfield project is going to be very different to the way you do it in a brownfield project. And in greenfield, you have this existing legacy way of working, main contractor, consultants, RFPs and the guidance and so on and so forth, right? Who, I mean, and what you don't find in those documents is what is the end outcome. Like I think I was reading one of the posts today on LinkedIn where someone said that stop backwashing instead of greenwashing. So it says that your specification says that you need to expose the points on BACnet, and someone would say, yes, we've done that, but 3 years down the line, when you want to scan the BACnet network, you don't find any of the points on the BACnet, right? But the way the specification would have been written, the subcontractor or the contractor got away, and they said that yes, we put something that was there, and off you go. Now, because in the greenfield project, no one focuses on the end outcomes right at the start, so it gets lost, right? You by the time you figure out that, hey, our specification probably wasn't right, the work that was done wasn't done in the best of spirits, and there is now a huge gap, is not the problem you'll see in brownfield, because you're immediately at every point in time focusing on the outcome. So if you want certain changes to be done to your network, it's part of an outcome that you want, right? And any changes that you bring, that's where you're absolutely right. I think, and also when you look at developed economies, even when you look at countries like UK and Australia, how much of new buildings are really going to come in? I mean, in India or developing nations, it's different, but in developed nations, the developed economies are very different, right? And again, one of the stats that after the slide one, which is 40%, the slide two is I don't know what percentage of the buildings, if 2050 has already been built,
Yeah,
right? So,
I guess.
yeah. So you effectively, when you combine that slide one and slide two, you effectively get to the point that while smart buildings as a marketing language is more encompassing, but essentially the smartness is, in my opinion, and an humble opinion, is going to be driven by retrofits, which in turn is going to be driven by what am I really wanting to add. If I'm running a commercial real estate, then it's going to be largely net zero, and sustainability, in my opinion, becomes the default for everyone. Primarily because there's a lot of movement happening, and second, also tied to that is a huge commercial implication. So one thing, irrespective of which country you are in, energy and emissions are key talking points, and they're beyond boardrooms now. They have become kind of what we used to call back in my manufacturing days and consulting days. They've become boiler room agendas rather than the boardroom agendas in that sense. But apart from that, there's going to be a lot of clarity in that sense. Yes. So summing up, I think net zero is net zero or sustainability or energy efficiency. There are different brackets. I know they're all different. I'm interchangeably using them at the liberty of trying to convey the message, but that's going to be the number one sort of driver. And plus, it depends on what kind of facility you're talking about. A commercial real estate will behave very differently than to a healthcare or to a infrastructure like an airport and so on and so forth. But there'll be a lot of clarity on what you want to get out of it in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, just as an aside, I wonder whether that sort of clarity around outcomes will also help generate will help drive innovation, because if you're clear about what it is that you're trying to achieve, then the solution, it's like understanding the jobs to be done properly might help you come up with the perfect fit around solution. Whereas if you're trying to have a kind of broader specification, we want every, then nothing is less likely that something is capable of doing something as well as when it's really specific to try and achieve that goal or outcome. The other thing, which I think kind of may be connected to this, and I wasn't quite sure how to paraphrase it, like FM evolution was one way. I think the evolving of the
I think the business model, yeah.
And and was what you're really talking about as a smart building as a service?
Uh, I mean, obviously there would be a bit of background and context to people why I always end up bringing FM companies into this discussion is because that's who I work for, as in they're my customers. So that's why I know a bit more about them as stakeholders in the entire smart sort of interaction. But Justin, you're absolutely right. When outcomes are clear, right, you have the optionality to be very clear onto the model and the pathway you're going to take. So, for example, what I was alluding to, and it's not really a business model innovation per se. It's weird how life goes back in cycles. Everything happens in cycles. There was a time when everyone wanted to be asset heavy, right? You wanted to own assets. Then came this amazing phenomena in industry where you say go asset light, you have more services, and so on and so forth. I guess what I'm alluding to, in case of engineering and particularly around net zero and retrofits, you're going to see, and that's one of our predictions for 2024 and beyond, is that you're going to see more asset heavy play by FM companies, which are more engineering focused, which would mean they would be willing to deploy capital. And again, these companies have to have capital or the ability to attract capital at a good interest rates, right? Some of the engineering companies, by the way, have that capacity, right? So they would then be able to go back and say, okay, you want to get to net zero in 7 years, 12 years, and here's a bunch of investments you would want to do. How about we doing that? And spanning it over a period of time so that you achieve the objective that you want to achieve, and we are in it for a long term, right? Because at the end of the day, when you look at FM contracts, largely have become so commoditized that you're only looking at a 3-year period, 1-year period, 2-year period. Very seldom would you see 5-year, and then there is there are clauses of market testing, so on and so forth. So what I'm what I personally see, and there has I've been I can honestly say that I've been privileged to be part of some of those conversations in the Middle East, in the UK, where some of the customers or some of the FM companies might say that, hey, we have deep pockets, we are willing to invest, and by the way, the only thing that stands between the net zero targets and the ability to meet that is capital, right? And that's where I see this evolution of business model happening, where FM companies and engineering companies which have deep pockets will want to become asset heavy, or at least be in that mode. Yeah. So there's a lot of business model innovation going to happen over there, in my opinion.
Take the risk, and they also get the reward for doing so.
Correct. Because right now the incentives are not there, right? Like, why would they change the status quo of how they've been doing things? Because the incentive is just not there, right? I mean, and with net zero, in my opinion, the amazing incentive comes through. Take example, if I'm a healthcare trust in any country, I manage so many hospitals and stuff like that, and I would need billions of dollars or pounds to be able to meet my targets. Whereas that sort of a capital can come from a lot of places, but most likely, in my opinion, will come from FM companies or
in
engineering companies.
in partnership with platform providers?
I mean, in partnership with platform providers. So that's thanks for bringing this up right now, because it's a brilliant segue. So essentially, what's going to happen is that's where technology is going to become effectively very important for FM companies. It was not so long ago. All FM companies wanted to have is a beautiful CAFM or a CMMS, again using it interchangeably, right? Because it did job for them. They essentially only had to do scheduled maintenance or reactive maintenance. They were happy with the tools that they were having. Now, once the companies start to take more risks, they have to mitigate it, and they would have to use technology and eventually move to a data first sort of a model, and that's where the connected perspective or is that people will start to ingrain FM leaders or leaders in the FM world will start to use technology as a differentiator, which means they would say that, hey, we will bring in end-to-end platform from the perspective of how everything happens across the asset lifecycle, and which essentially means that FM tech per se garners a lot of importance in 2024 and beyond, and that's we've already started to see that the language that the FM leaders are talking. There were some CXOs who never spoke about technology, have started to speak about technology. They've started to write about it on LinkedIn. So there's something that's really happening. So connected to that, you have the business model innovation happening, more asset heavy, wanting to take the risk in lieu of better reward. Now, once you take the risk, you have to mitigate it. That's where technology comes into play. That is where FM tech assumes a lot of prominence.
Yeah, so maybe we should have done this podcast as a sort of live business model canvas, and like partnership block the things we should have looked at, customer relationship as a service, partners. I mean, look, clearly we are seeing some of the bigger the big four investing in technology companies. I mean, just to name one off the top of my head, CBRE with DeepKey and VTS would be an example. But also landlords are doing this too with British Land and Equium, for example. So that is definitely a phenomena. I guess.
I would one correction I'd say is that, and that's my also, that don't look at built environment only from the lens of commercial real estate or real estate.
Okay.
There is a significant traction. I think the non-CRE FM companies are much more mature in use of technology when it comes to hard services. The CRE focused FM companies are matured when it comes to soft services and the customer front end of it. So going back, but unfortunately, your customer front end apps will not help you meet your net zero goals, right? So when you look at that deep disconnect, so one, I want to call out loud that do not look at everything on trends from the real estate point of view. Real estate does not completely make up the built environment. And there are a lot of non-CRE buildings or the normal real estate buildings that you would look at, which are managed by engineering first FM companies who are silently doing what they need to do. They don't really essentially take out a lot of blogs on AI and stuff, but trust me, they are significantly miles ahead in cracking the code when it comes to hard services and engineering and use of tech.
Well, I think, before this becomes more than just a taster for people about what a conversation might be like, I just wanted to throw one last thing at you, because you kind of use
Sure.
this about because of what you've just described, you see a kind of day of reckoning for platforms. Could you just elaborate on that a bit?
And that's been a personal learning as well. I always thought that you could be an application or you could do something niche and grow. I think there are two movements happening, honestly, Justin. Is one, because of the whatever happened last year because of generative AI, not directly because of generative AI, but somehow the software world has been shaken. where people are saying that you've got to be outcome focused. So there's this entire conversation happening around in the software as a service markets and saying enough, or you've enjoyed your 90% gross margins for way too long and stuff like that. So there's a shift happening there. And the second is saying that if you are in a you're a vertical software, you've got to go deep and essentially become a platform to do end to end, right? Like people will not use multiple different applications to drive. Now, whether the FM companies themselves become the platform or they or you know, but I think eventually whoever is FDD will get into backward integration. Whoever is a CMMS will go into forward integration, and ultimately there's going to be consolidation. You will not have, and which by the way we've already started to see. If you look at some of the companies which have been conventionally into only FDD, have started to talk about stuff which more like conventionally would have been a CMMS player, right? So yeah, I think one that's definitely there. So I think consolidation, not just in the form of mergers, acquisitions, partnerships, but consolidation also in the process of saying we might just see towards the end of 2024 platforms evolve much more strongly versus just applications.
I mean, and maybe one for when we speak to others, but a kind of logical conclusion of that, outcomes orientated approach is that will be what your financial reward will be based on, not necessarily on the monthly fee.
Absolutely. I think that per square feet concept or per asset or per data point concept, I don't think it will survive the test of 2024. I mean, that's my gut. In fact, I also posted it on LinkedIn, but there were mixed reactions. I mean, most people said it's a long way off. I mean, most people don't believe that outcome-based pricing can come through, but yeah, I mean, I think if it comes through, it's actually going to be a watershed moment for the industry, because a lot of honesty problems that you were seeing will all go away because you're effectively going to be paid on outcomes. And we'll see by default everyone being very honest on the outcomes then.
Well, a huge thank for that. I mean, just to finish off, I thought maybe we should introduce the next guest.
So that's where I was about to ask, is that enough of our interaction, but I know that you've been doing heaps of work, connecting to a lot of people. Tell the listeners on all the speakers who are going to come through for the next 2, 3, 4 episodes. What is the lineup looking like, buddy?
I will kind of sort of try and sort of give the names of all the kind of people and where they're coming from. But like last year, I also ran a round table with some of the rating bodies, but one of them I didn't invite, partly because they didn't have any representatives on the ground in the UK, was a Smart Collective. And so they said, what about us? And I said, tell you what, I'm doing this new podcast series. So I've invited Elizabeth Nelson and Nicholas White from the Smart Buildings Collective to come and speak. I've also been speaking to FM, but in slightly different areas, because a lot of those FM companies have different divisions, whether it's investment management, advisory, or kind of the services that you're talking about.
Right.
So I have both Renata Hartle from Colliers, who sort of heads up their smart building side, and also Charlotte Langthaler from CBRE. Charlotte is, she very interestingly has a role which kind of straddles for Google between this kind of softer workplacing and the harder technology side. I also, because I went to a really interesting event hosted by the people at the IWBI, which you do the well rating, the Institute of Well-being, whatever, IWBI, International Wellbeing Institute. And also presented there was Leesman, who have their Leesman Index for Employee Experience. So Anne-Marie Aquila from IWBI, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, and Sandra Gritti from Leesman, I've invited them to speak because often that kind of healthy building, tenant experience, not just tenant experience, but employee experience or workplace experience gets missed in the smart building space. So I would help balance that out. And also I've been speaking to, I mean, interestingly, and I thought that was a fantastic way of summing up one's career. But Sandra worked for Edge, the developer, and then also their spin-off Edge Next, the platform, and she's now
Hmm.
a Eastman. So her career progression has kind of gone from bricks to bytes to behaviors. So I thought that was kind of interesting perspective. Lastly, you've touched upon net zero, and so I've asked Katie Whip, who's like head of partnerships at Resustain. Her,
Hmm.
she's like ex Trust Deck, who are one of the design consultancies and accreditors of platforms, but also
Hmm.
worked at DeepKey, CBRE, Colliers, etc. And Anna
Wow.
Oden from ISG, she's head of sustainability there. ISG are one of the main contractors and fit out specialists. So what I really wanted to do with this sort of pilot series was try to kind of, as the accompaniment to the round table with those at the sharp end, was to try and give a sort of broader balanced view so that, because, people are selling services and platforms have, different agendas. So hopefully as a kind of, you
That's
know,
a
as a kind of group of people that we'd get some really interesting conversations. So Nicholas and Elizabeth from the Smart Buildings Collective will be next up. And I think we are recording the interview with them, the conversation, with them tomorrow.
No, I think it's a great lineup, and honestly, both to the listeners and to yourself, Justin, please don't expect much from me. I'm going to be silently observing because one of my, in fact, glad that you've actually put across a very diverse group of people to consolidate and build a consensus, right? And in fact, if I can be very honest over here, I think while I might always say that, okay, we are the one who we're not biased, sometimes we also get biased, and I've also got biased in my own opinions. And I'm so looking forward to hearing perspectives which are so lateral, and then ultimately all of that being built together to build a consensus and take it in from there. But honestly, I'm going to be in awe of all of those conversations. So don't expect me to ask a lot of great questions. I'll be really relying on you to do that in that sense. But thank you so much for coming through for this episode or in the intro episode in that sense. Any final concluding points that you would like to make, Justin?
Just really to thank you and your team for helping support all of this. I mean, it really helps. As I kind of we've discussed before, I'm always trying to find sort of new and better ways of communicating. So, that could be as simple as an infographic, but I just think, if you have a kind of multiple different types of ways of, having conversations, whether it's roundtables, panel sessions, podcasts, out of that, I think, you probably will get that sanity and clarity that you're hoping will be one of the
What
big,
we're looking for. No,
yeah.
mate. I mean, I think it was long overdue, and I'm glad that we are a small part of this. You're the main driving force. I'm just tagging along, but happy to do that, and incredibly excited for all the conversations that we're going to have, and then ultimately the kind of common consensus that comes out of it. So thank you so much. By the way, as I mentioned at the start of the call, while we did not start the recording, the shirt's looking pretty nice. Good to see you and not the boring colors. Right, this one looks really good.
Thank you. Look forward to catching up with you tomorrow to speak to Nicholas and Elizabeth.
Perfect, mate. Same here.
Bye then.